My name is Carlo, and I am a 38-year-old Filipino man who spent 12 years laboring as a construction worker in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. On March 15, 2023, I was detained along with a small group of fellow believers not for a large gathering, but for quietly discussing faith with a few Saudis who had grown weary of the strict interpretations preached by some imams. In a kingdom where Islam is the only allowed religion and sharing any other belief can be seen as an attack on Allah's truth, our actions crossed a dangerous line. What I am sharing now is my own journey through hardship, secrecy, and a deepening trust in Jesus. It's a story that shows how grace can find its way even in places where the call to prayer rings out 5 times a day, and the name of Jesus is rarely spoken aloud. Prepare yourself as you listen, because what happened in the heat of Riyadh's construction sites and the shadows of its labor camps will remind you that God's light reaches the most unexpected corners. I grew up in the same small village in Pangasinan, surrounded by endless rice fields that turned golden during harvest season. Life there was a constant battle against poverty. My father passed away when I was 16, taken by a sudden illness that our local clinic in Lingayen couldn't treat properly. He left my mother to care for me and my 3 younger siblings in a simple nipa hut near the fields outside Urdaneta. Money was always short. My mother sold vegetables at the market in Dagupan City, waking before dawn to catch the early jeepneys. I quit school after high school. There was no way to afford college fees, or even the daily commute to a university in San Carlos City. Instead, I worked wherever I could, planting rice during the wet season, fishing in the rivers near Balanao, or helping with construction on small homes in the nearby barangays. Every day was about survival, putting rice and fish on the table, maybe some canned sardines if we were lucky. Faith was part of our routine, mostly through the Catholic traditions everyone followed in Pangasinan. We'd walk to the church in Manoag for special feasts, praying to Our Lady for better days. My mother taught us to say the rosary at night, and I'd join her, finding some peace in the familiar prayers. But it was more habit than deep conviction. God felt like someone we turned to when typhoons flooded our fields or when bills piled up. I never thought faith would one day become the center of my life in a country where Muslims devote themselves fully to Allah, attending mosques like the massive Al-Raji Grand Mosque in Riyadh, and where imams deliver powerful Friday sermons in submission to Islamic teachings. By 2011, at 24, I couldn't see a future in Pangasinan. My siblings needed school supplies, my mother needed rest from her aching back, and opportunities were scarce. Friends who had gone abroad as OFWs came back with stories of better pay, showing off new houses in Colegio or motorcycles for family use. A recruitment agency in Manila had openings for construction in Riyadh, the capital city booming with skyscrapers, malls like the Riyadh Gallery Mall, and endless projects. The salary promised was around 1,800 Saudi riyals a month, far more than I could ever earn back home. I signed up quickly, borrowing for the placement fees and medical checks, and hugged my mother tightly at Ninoy Aquino International Airport before flying out. Arriving at King Khalid International Airport in Riyadh was overwhelming. The dry heat slapped me as I stepped off the plane over 45 degrees Celsius in summer, with sand blowing everywhere, nothing like Pangasinan's humid rains. I was bussed to a labor camp in the Al-Mana district, a crowded area on the city's outskirts filled with low concrete blocks housing thousands of foreign workers. My room held 8 of us Filipinos, thin mattresses on the floor, a weak fan struggling against the night heat, and an AC unit that often broke down. The camp was surrounded by fences, with buses picking us up at dawn for sites across the city. The work was punishing. I joined crews building high-rises and infrastructure in areas like Al-Olea, the busy business district with towers like the Kingdom Center. We'd labor from early morning, lifting steel, pouring concrete under the scorching sun that made sweat evaporate instantly. Hands blistered, backs ached, and dust filled our lungs during frequent sandstorms. Breaks were brief, just water and maybe some bread. Foremen pushed hard for deadlines, and delays in wages were common, sometimes months, without pay when companies faced issues, leaving us relying on small loans from the Philippine embassy in Riyadh or food from fellow workers. I sent most of my earnings home, helping build a better house for my family and covering my siblings' education. The sacrifice felt worth it, seeing their lives improve little by little. But the deepest struggle was spiritual. Riyadh is a city centered on Islam. The Adhan calls Muslims to prayer from minarets everywhere, crowds filling mosques like the King Khalid Grand Mosque for Jumu'ah. As a non-Muslim, I felt like an invisible guest. Agency orientations warned us clearly: no open practice of other religions. Christianity was not tolerated. Possessing a Bible openly or gathering could draw the attention of authorities enforcing Sharia. Stories spread in the camps of workers deported for small signs of faith, or questioned by religious police about hidden items. So I kept my beliefs private, praying silently during breaks, recalling childhood verses while carrying heavy loads. My heart ached for real fellowship, cut off from the community worship I'd known back home. That changed in 2014, my third year, when I met Brother Vikram. He was an Indian technician from Mumbai, working electrical installations on a mall project near Panorama Mall. In his 50s, with a gentle smile and steady eyes, he spotted me tracing a cross on my chest one hot afternoon under a scaffold shade. Whispering carefully, he asked, "Brother, are you walking with Christ?" Fear gripped me. Could this be a setup? But his sincerity shone through. I nodded, and he shared quietly about a hidden network of believers. Vikram introduced me to the underground world of expatriate Christians in Riyadh. Mostly workers like us: Filipinos, Indians, Ethiopians, Nepalis scattered in labor areas like Al-Nuzha or Al-Sawaidi. We met discreetly on Thursdays, when many Muslims attended afternoon prayers, in small apartments in worker housing blocks. Vikram warned of the dangers: if discovered, arrest, interrogation, or deportation. But the need for community outweighed the fear. My first gathering moved me deeply. The apartment was simple, mats on the floor for about 12 people. Hearing soft worship songs in Tagalog and English after years of silence brought tears. We shared from phone apps, no physical Bibles to avoid risks. Brother Joseph, a Kenyan driver, led us gently. Sister Lena, a Filipina nurse at a hospital like King Faisal Specialist, offered words of hope. Carlo, in this city where imams teach devotion to Allah alone, God has placed us as lights for years. Our small group met faithfully, praying for safety, sharing burdens, dodging suspicions like odd noises reported by neighbors or patrols during busy seasons. We used codes. Prayer meeting became family. Gathering, the constant caution was draining, but it strengthened my faith, turning quiet tradition into a living reliance on Jesus amid the risks. I never imagined that our careful sharing would one day extend to curious locals, Saudis questioning the rigid paths laid out by some imams. And that step would pull us into a trial that tested everything we held dear. Brother Vikram's words lingered in my mind long after that lunch break under the scaffold. "Do you follow Christ?" he had asked. And in that moment, the weight of my isolation in Riyadh lifted just a fraction. But doubt crept in fast. Was this safe in a city where Muslims gather openly at mosques like the Grand Al-Raji Grand Mosque for Friday prayers, and imams preach about devotion to Allah from the pulpits? Even whispering about Jesus could invite trouble from the religious police, the Mutawin. They patrolled neighborhoods, enforcing Sharia, and stories of expats being questioned for carrying crosses or discussing faith spread like wildfire through the labor camps. Yet my soul was starving. Years of silent prayers while mixing cement or hauling steel beams had left me hollow. I needed more than memorized verses. I needed brothers and sisters to share the burden. A few days later, Vikram approached me again during our shift break at the construction site in Al Olaya, where we were wiring up a new tower block. He spoke in hushed tones, glancing around at the Saudi foreman barking orders in Arabic. "There's a place, Carlo, not far from the camp in Al-Nuzha. Thursdays, when the city slows for Jumu'ah prayers. But remember, if anyone finds out, it's over deportation, jail, or worse." He explained the risks. Saudi law forbade non-Muslims from proselytizing or gathering publicly, and even private meetings could be raided if neighbors reported strange noises or suspicious gatherings. The Mutawin didn't need much evidence. A tip from a disgruntled worker could lead to your door being kicked in. But Vikram assured me, Jesus meets us there. It's worth it. I agreed to go, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. That Thursday, after a grueling day lifting rebar under the relentless Riyadh sun temperatures hitting 43 degrees, sweat soaking through my work clothes, I cleaned up quickly in the camp's shared showers, the cold water a brief relief from the dust and grime. I changed into plain clothes, nothing flashy, and walked the 20 minutes to the address Vikram had scribbled on a scrap of paper. The apartment was in a nondescript worker housing block, similar to mine. Cracked walls, narrow stairs smelling of curry from Indian cooks and adobo from Filipino kitchens. I knocked softly, and Vikram opened the door, pulling me inside quickly. Stepping in was like entering another world. The room was small, barely fitting 12 people on worn rugs and plastic stools. But the air hummed with quiet energy. Someone had a small speaker playing soft instrumental hymns at low volume, careful not to carry through the thin walls. I heard voices in Tagalog, Hindi, Amharic, Filipinos like me, Indians, Ethiopians, a couple of Nepalis. They were singing How Great Thou Art, but so softly it was almost a whisper. Tears welled up before I could stop them. It had been years since I'd sung worship openly. Back in Pangasinan, we'd belt out hymns at the Manoag church festivals, but here, in the heart of Islam, where calls to prayer echoed from minarets 5 times a day, this felt like stolen treasure. Vikram introduced me around. There was Brother Joseph, a Kenyan driver in his 50s with a deep, reassuring voice. He led the group informally. No fancy titles, just sharing from his phone's Bible app since physical books were too risky to keep. We're family here, Carlo, he said, shaking my hand firmly. Jesus brings us together in places where the world tries to pull us apart. Then there was Sister Lena, the Filipina nurse I'd heard about. She worked long shifts at a hospital in Malaz, treating patients while hiding her faith. In her early 30s, with a warm smile that hid the exhaustion of 12-hour days, she had a way of making you feel seen. "Welcome, brother," she whispered. "God knew you needed this tonight." The group was diverse, about 15 regulars from different camps across Riyadh. A Nepali mason named Hari, who built walls by day and prayed for his village back home, 2 Ethiopian maids, Selam and Abiba, who cleaned villas in the diplomatic quarter but found solace here, an Indian plumber like Vikram. We were all expats, bound by work visas and the kafala system that tied us to employers, but united in Christ. No Saudis, of course, that would be suicide. Sharing faith with Muslims was forbidden, punishable by arrest for proselytizing, and apostasy for any local who converted meant death under Sharia. We stuck to our own, but even that was dangerous. We started with worship, singing hymns like Amazing Grace, and It Is Well With My Soul at a murmur, eyes darting to the door. Then Brother Joseph opened his phone to read from Ephesians, talking about being strong in the Lord amid spiritual battles. In this kingdom where imams call people to prayer and devotion to Allah fills the air, he said, we're reminded that our battle isn't against flesh and blood. We're here to encourage each other, to hold on. People shared prayer requests softly. Hari's family facing floods in Nepal, Lena's worry about a sick mother in Cebu, my own for my siblings' school fees. We prayed in small circles, hands clasped, voices blending in languages that somehow felt like one. That first night, I wept openly as Lena prayed for me. Father, surround Carlo with your peace in this foreign land. Let him feel your presence amid the heat and hardship. For the first time since arriving in Riyadh, I didn't feel alone. But the joy was tempered by caution. As we wrapped up after an hour, we deleted any apps with Christian content from phones, spoken code about the next meeting, family dinner Thursday, and slipped out one by one to avoid suspicion. Over the next 5 years, those Thursday gatherings became my lifeline. We'd rotate apartments in areas like Al Sawaidi or Al Rada, always in worker blocks where foreigners outnumbered locals. Attendance grew slowly to 20, but we stayed small to minimize risk. Close calls were constant. Once, during Ramadan when tensions ran high with fasting Muslims and stricter patrols, a neighbor banged on the door complaining about noise. We froze, hearts racing, as Joseph calmly explained it was just friends chatting. The man left grumbling, but we ended early, praying silently for protection. Another time, in 2018, rumors spread through the camps about a raid in Jeddah. Filipinos arrested for a prayer meeting after a tip from a colleague. It hit close. We doubled our vigilance, using burner apps for coordination and avoiding any written notes. But the fear only deepened our bonds. Sister Lena became like a sister to me, always encouraging Carlo. Think of Daniel in the lion's den. God shuts mouths when we trust him. She'd share stories of patients at the hospital, Muslims showing kindness unknowingly, reminding us God was at work even here. Brother Joseph taught us to live boldly, yet wisely. We don't proselytize, that's a fast ticket out or worse. But our lives speak. When coworkers see our integrity amid unpaid wages or abuse, they notice. Indeed, the camps were full of injustices, delayed salaries, passport confiscation by sponsors, heat exhaustion on sites where safety gear was minimal. We'd pray for strength, for justice, drawing from verses like Isaiah 41 verse 10, "Fear not, for I am with you." Through it all, my faith transformed. What began as ritual in Pangasinan became vibrant, tested fire. Singing softly in that cramped room, sharing burdens under the shadow of minarets, I learned Jesus was enough, even in a land where his name was whispered in secret. But whispers have a way of growing louder, and soon, our circle would face a temptation that changed everything, reaching out to a few curious Muslims questioning the rigid path of their imams. That step into the unknown would lead us straight into the storm. The Thursday evening of March 15th, 2023, started like any other in Riyadh. The desert sun had dipped below the skyline of Al Olaya Towers, leaving a lingering heat that clung to everything. I had just finished a 12-hour shift on a construction site near the Riyadh Season Boulevard, where we were pouring foundations for a new entertainment complex. My shoulders burned from carrying steel bars, my clothes were stiff with dust and sweat, and all I wanted was a quick shower and rest. But Thursdays were sacred. No matter how exhausted we were, the fellowship was our oxygen. In a city where the Adhan called Muslims to prayer 5 times a day, and imams reminded the faithful of Allah's oneness from every mosque, that small apartment was the one place we could breathe freely. I walked the familiar route from the labor camp in Al-Nuzha to the apartment block in Al-Rada. The streets were quieter than usual. Many Saudis were preparing for family dinners or attending evening prayers at local mosques like the nearby Al-Raji branch. Foreign workers like me moved in small groups, heads down, avoiding eye contact with the occasional patrol car. I kept my hands in my pockets, feeling the small wooden cross bead I'd hidden there since leaving Pangasinan. It was my quiet reminder that I belonged to someone greater than the sponsor who held my passport. When I arrived, most of the group was already there, about 18 of us squeezed into the modest 2-room flat that belonged to an Indian brother who worked as a storekeeper. The living room had been cleared of furniture. Plastic sheets and old rugs covered the floor, with a few folding chairs for the older ones. Brother Joseph stood near the window, phone in hand, ready to lead. Sister Lena was helping Selam and Abiba arrange bottles of water and a tray of dates, simple refreshments we shared like communion. Vikram greeted me with a nod and a quick embrace, his eyes tired but bright. Hari, the Nepali mason, sat cross-legged in the corner, humming softly. The air carried the faint scent of instant coffee and the rose water someone used to freshen the room. We began, as always, with worship. Brother Joseph dimmed the lights slightly and started a soft instrumental track on his phone, low enough that it wouldn't travel through the walls. We sang "Great is Thy Faithfulness" first, voices barely above a whisper, yet the harmony felt powerful in that confined space. I closed my eyes and let the words wash over me. All I have needed thy hand hath provided. In a land where everything, my salary, my safety, My freedom depended on human systems. Those lyrics anchored me. After 2 songs, Joseph opened to the book of Acts. Chapter 16, the story of Paul and Silas in the Philippian jail. They prayed and sang hymns to God. He read quietly, and suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken. His voice was steady, full of conviction. Brothers and sisters, we may not face literal chains yet, but we know what it is to be bound by fear, by visas, by silence. But the same God who shook that prison is with us tonight. The teaching stirred something deep. Several shared afterward. Lena spoke of a patient at the hospital, a young Saudi woman struggling with illness, who had quietly asked why Christians seemed to have hope even in suffering. I couldn't say much, Lena admitted, but I prayed for her in my heart. Vikram shared about a new worker on his site asking questions after seeing him refuse to join gossip about unpaid wages. He said, "Why don't you complain like the rest?" I told him my strength comes from Jesus. We nodded, knowing how rare and risky such conversations were. Saudi citizens are raised in a system where Islam is not just faith, but identity, leaving it as apostasy, punishable by law. Even private curiosity could cost a local everything. Then came prayer time. We broke into smaller circles of 3 or 4. I joined Vikram and Hari. We held hands lightly, eyes open to watch the door. Hari prayed for his wife's health back in Kathmandu. Vikram asked for wisdom on the job site. I lifted up my family in Pangasinan, my mother's high blood pressure, my youngest sister's college entrance exams. As we prayed, a peace settled despite the danger. It always did. In those moments, the concrete walls seemed to fade, and we were simply children before our Father. It was just past 9:30 p.m. when the mood shifted. Sister Lena was about to lead a final song as well when we heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. At first, I thought it was neighbors returning from tearaway prayers, common during the holy months. But the footsteps stopped outside our door. Voices in Arabic, sharp, authoritative. Brother Joseph raised a hand for silence. We froze. This wasn't the first false alarm. We'd practiced staying calm. But then came the pounding, hard, deliberate knocks that rattled the flimsy door frame. Before anyone could react, the door burst open with a crash. 6 men in the black uniforms of the Saudi police stormed in, followed by 2 in the distinctive white thobes and red-checkered headscarves of the Mutawain religious police. Flashlights swept the room, blinding us. "Kulukum, hands up, do not move," one shouted in Arabic, while another translated roughly in English. Panic surged through me like electricity. I saw Lena's face go pale, her hands trembling as she raised them. Vikram closed his eyes, lips moving silently. Joseph stood slowly, trying to remain composed. The officers moved with practiced efficiency. They ordered us to line up against the wall while they searched. Phones were confiscated immediately. Ours held Bible apps, worship playlists, group chats with coded messages. One officer found a small notebook in Joseph's bag with handwritten prayer requests. He held it up triumphantly, barking something to his colleague. Another discovered a USB drive hidden in a shoe with audio sermons. Within minutes, everything that proved we were Christians was piled on the table like evidence of a crime. A senior Mutawain officer, tall, bearded, with cold eyes, stepped forward and addressed Joseph directly. "Who is the leader here who organized this illegal gathering?" His tone dripped with disgust. Joseph answered calmly in broken Arabic, "We are just friends meeting peacefully. We harm no one." But the man wasn't interested in explanations. He accused us of spreading corruption in the land, of insulting Islam by worshiping another god. The words stung, but worse was watching Lena and the Ethiopian sisters being separated, women handled by female officers who had entered behind the men. One by one, we were handcuffed. The metal was cold and tight, biting into my wrists. I'd never been arrested before, not in the Philippines, not anywhere. I was just a construction worker trying to support my family. Now I was being treated like a criminal for praying. As they marched us out, neighbors peeked from cracked doors, some fellow expats with fear in their eyes, others Saudis watching impassively. The hallway felt endless. Down the stairs, past the compound gate where a crowd of curious workers had gathered, whispering in Tagalog and Hindi. Outside waited 3 police SUVs with lights flashing silently in the dark. We were divided, men in one, women in another. I ended up beside Vikram and Hari. Vikram's face was ashen, but he whispered, Psalm 23, Carlo. The Lord is my shepherd. I nodded, trying to hold on to the words as the door slammed shut. The drive through Riyadh's night streets felt surreal. We passed illuminated mosques, luxury malls still open late, billboards advertising the latest entertainment, events, a city thriving under strict Islamic rule, where our quiet worship was seen as a threat. No one spoke in the vehicle. The officers up front talked casually in Arabic, occasionally glancing back at us with contempt. I stared out the tinted window, wondering if I'd ever see my mother again, if my remittances would stop, if my siblings would know what happened to me. After about 40 minutes, the SUVs slowed and turned into a fortified compound. High concrete walls topped with barbed wire loomed under floodlights. Armed guards stood at the gate. A sign in Arabic and English read Malaz Prison General Investigation Directorate. My stomach dropped. Malaz Prison was notorious among foreign workers, one of the main detention centers in Riyadh for security and religious offenses. Stories circulated in the camps: long interrogations, isolation cells, pressure to inform on others. As the heavy gates clanged open and we were ordered out, reality hit me fully. I had come to Saudi Arabia chasing a better life for my family in Pangasinan. Now those gates were closing behind me, and I had no idea if I would ever walk out again. But even as fear gripped my chest, a small voice inside whispered the words we'd just sung, "Great is thy faithfulness." I clung to it as they marched us into the cold, brightly lit processing hall, unsure what trials waited in the days ahead. The heavy steel doors of Malaz Prison slammed shut behind us with a finality that echoed through my bones. The sound was cold, metallic, absolute, like the closing of a tomb. Floodlights bathed the courtyard in harsh white light, revealing rows of gray concrete buildings, watchtowers with armed guards, and coils of razor wire glinting atop the walls. The air here was different, thick with disinfectant, sweat, and something heavier, despair. I stood in line with Vikram, Hari, and the others, wrists still cuffed, hearts pounding as officers barked orders in Arabic. This was no ordinary jail. Malaz Prison, in the heart of Riyadh, was known among foreign workers as a place where people entered for religious violations and sometimes disappeared into the system for months or years. We were marched through a series of checkpoints. First, they removed the metal handcuffs only to replace them with tight plastic zip ties that cut into the skin. At the next station, they stripped us of everything: wallets, phones, belts, even the small wooden cross bead I'd carried since Pangasinan. An officer tossed my few possessions, some reals, a photo of my mother, a worn work ID, into a plastic bag labeled with a number. I watched it disappear into a bin with hundreds of others and wondered if I would ever see it again. Then came the photographs, front, side, fingerprints pressed hard onto an electronic scanner. They recorded my name, nationality, sponsor company, everything that tied me to this life I had built through years of sweat. After processing, they separated us. The women Lena, Selam, Abiba were taken down a different corridor with female guards. I caught one last glimpse of Lena's face, pale but resolute, her lips moving in silent prayer. Then the men were split further. Vikram and I were assigned to Block C, a section for foreign detainees facing security or religious charges. 2 guards gripped my arms and marched me through dim hallways that smelled of bleach and old concrete. The walls were bare, stained with damp patches, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry insects. My bare feet felt the cold floor with every step. My cell was a narrow box, maybe 3 meters by 2. A thin mattress on a concrete slab, a steel toilet in the corner with no seat or privacy, a small sink with a dripping tap. High on one wall was a barred window, too small and too high to see out of, only a sliver of gray sky visible. The door was solid steel with a slot at the bottom for food trays. When it clanged shut and the lock clicked, the silence hit me like a wave. Complete, suffocating silence broken only by distant shouts in Arabic and the occasional slam of another door. For the first 4 days, I saw no one except the guard who slid a tray through the slot 3 times a day. A piece of flatbread, rice, sometimes a watery lentil stew, a cup of weak tea. The portions were small. Hunger became a constant companion. I forced myself to eat everything, knowing I needed strength for whatever was coming. But the isolation was worse than the hunger. No voices, no faces, no news of the others. Were Vikram and Hari in nearby cells? Was Lena safe? Had our sponsors been notified? Would my family in Pangasinan ever know what happened? I had no Bible, no phone, nothing. But I had the words I'd memorized over years of secret fellowship. I whispered to them into the emptiness, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want ye. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Over and over, pacing the tiny cell, sitting on the mattress, lying on the hard slab at night under the constant fluorescent glare that never dimmed. Sleep came in fits, haunted by dreams of my mother's worried face and the sound of police boots. On the 5th day, the interrogations began. 2 officers in plain clothes came early, before the morning meal tray. They cuffed my hands in front and marched me to a small windowless room with a metal table bolted to the floor and 3 plastic chairs. One officer sat across from me, the other stood behind, arms crossed. They started gently, almost kindly, asking basic questions. Name, job, how long in Saudi Arabia, who I knew in the group. I answered truthfully but carefully, giving no extra details. But the tone shifted quickly. "Why were you meeting secretly?" the seated one asked in English. "What were you planning? Who else is involved?" They showed printouts from our confiscated phones, screenshots of Bible verses, worship song lyrics, group chat messages about family gatherings. One officer slapped the table hard. "You know this is forbidden. You insult Islam by bringing your false religion here." The standing officer leaned in close. "We know you were trying to spread Christianity. Tell us the names of others. Cooperate, and things will be easier." I stayed calm, repeating the same answers. "We were just friends praying together. We harmed no one. We never spoke to Saudis about faith." That last part was true, then we hadn't yet crossed that line. But they didn't believe me. They accused me of lying, of being part of a network trying to corrupt Muslims. Hours passed. They left me alone in the room for long stretches, then returned with the same questions, trying to wear me down. Sometimes they shouted, sometimes they spoke softly, promising leniency if I confessed everything. The psychological pressure was relentless. One day they claimed Vikram had already confessed and blamed me for organizing everything. Another time they said Lena had broken down and named others. Each lie was a knife in the heart. I refused to confirm or deny anything that could hurt the others. I remembered Jesus' words. "Whoever denies me before men, I will deny before my Father." No matter how exhausted or afraid I felt, I could not renounce him. After 10 days, they allowed us brief exercise periods, 30 minutes, in a concrete yard surrounded by high walls. That first time outside, the sun felt both blinding and merciful after the constant artificial light. I scanned the yard desperately and saw Vikram across the space, thinner, eyes sunken, but alive. He gave a small nod. Hari was there too, limping slightly perhaps from rough handling. We weren't allowed to speak or approach each other, but those glances were gold. Guards watched closely, but we developed tiny signals. A hand over the heart for encouragement, 2 fingers raised for peace. Later, during meal times when guards were distracted, we found ways to pass messages. A folded scrap of paper tucked under a tray. A whispered word to a trusty prisoner who cleaned cells. Through this fragile chain, news traveled. Lena and the women were in a separate block, but holding strong. Joseph had endured the harshest questioning, but refused to break. Everyone was clinging to faith. One day, a small piece of paper reached me passed from Lena through Salam to a Filipino kitchen worker to me. On it, in tiny handwriting, was Isaiah 41 verse 10. "Fear not, for I am with you, be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you." I hid it under the edge of my mattress and read it every night. It became my lifeline. Conditions were designed to break the spirit. Cold showers twice a week, the same stiff prison uniform for weeks until it reeked, no visitors, no phone calls, no letters. Sleep deprivation from the never-off lights. Poor food that left us weak. Yet small signs of God's presence appeared. A guard who usually barked orders suddenly spoke softly one day. An extra piece of bread appeared on my tray without explanation. Another believer reported dreaming the same verse as Lena's note. Brother Joseph, even in isolation, remained our anchor. Through the message chain, he sent encouragement, stand firm. The God who delivered Paul and Silas is the same yesterday, today, forever. His faith didn't waver, even when they threatened longer sentences or deportation bans. As weeks turned into a month, hope flickered but never died. We knew the charges illegal religious gathering, possession of prohibited materials could mean months more in detention, heavy fines, permanent blacklisting from the kingdom. But we also knew our God was bigger than Malaz Prison, bigger than the laws of men, bigger than the fear that tried to choke us daily. I clung to that truth in the darkness of my cell, whispering prayers into the silence, waiting for whatever God would do next. Little did I know that the deepest test and the greatest revelation was still to come. It was sometime in early May 2023. Time had blurred into a meaningless haze inside Malaz Prison. I had lost count of the exact days, but it had been roughly 7 weeks since the raid. The interrogations had become less frequent, as if the investigators were waiting for us to crack under the weight of isolation. My body was weaker. The poor food, the constant fluorescent light that robbed me of proper sleep, the endless pacing in that tiny cell had taken their toll. My mind wandered often to Pangasinan, the green rice fields after rain, my mother's voice calling me for dinner, the sound of church bells in Manoag. But those memories felt distant, like scenes from someone else's life. That night, I lay on the thin mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling under the buzzing light. Despair pressed down heavier than ever. I whispered prayers that felt like they bounced off the concrete walls and fell back unanswered. Lord, why have you allowed this? Have you forgotten us? How much longer must we endure? Tears came quietly, soaking the flattened pillow. I thought of Lena, Vikram, Joseph, Hari, all of us scattered in this fortress of gray, cut off from the world. I wondered if our families had been told anything, if the Philippine embassy was even trying to help. The silence was crushing. Then, without warning, the atmosphere in the cell changed. The harsh fluorescent glow softened, as if someone had turned a dimmer switch. A warm, golden light began to fill the space, not from the bulb overhead, but from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was brighter than daylight, yet gentle on my eyes, like the first rays of sunrise over the fields back home. The air grew warmer, carrying a faint fragrance I couldn't place, clean, alive, holy. My heart raced. Was I dreaming, hallucinating from exhaustion? I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes, but the light only intensified. And then he was there. Standing at the foot of my mattress, in the center of that radiant glow, was a figure I knew instantly, though I had never seen him with physical eyes before. He was tall, robed in brilliant white that seemed to shimmer with its own light, no seam, no stain, purer than anything on earth. His hair was dark and fell to his shoulders. His hands were open at his sides, scarred in the palms. But it was his face that captured me completely. Eyes deep with compassion, yet piercing with perfect knowledge. A face that held authority and tenderness in equal measure. There was no mistaking him. This was Jesus, the one we had worshipped in secret apartments, the one whose name we dared not speak aloud in this land devoted to Allah. I could not move. I could not speak. My breath caught in my throat as tears streamed down my face. He looked directly at me, and in that gaze I felt every hidden part of my soul laid bare, every doubt, every fear, every moment I had questioned his presence in this prison. Yet there was no condemnation, only love so vast it overwhelmed me. He did not open his mouth, yet I heard his voice clearly, not with my ears, but deep in my spirit, as if he spoke directly into my heart. Carlo. The way he said my name made me feel known, cherished, as if I were the only person in the universe at that moment. Do not be afraid. I am with you. I have seen every tear. I have heard every prayer whispered in this place. I know the suffering you and my children have endured for my name's sake. The words flowed through me like warm oil, soothing wounds I didn't even know I carried. Peace real, supernatural peace flooded my chest for the first time since the night of the arrest. I tried to respond, to ask the questions burning inside me. Why this prison? Why the separation from my family? When will we be free? But my voice failed, only sobs came out. He stepped closer. The light around him grew even brighter, pushing back the shadows until the gray walls seemed to dissolve. I no longer felt confined. It was as if I stood in an open, endless space filled with glory. Again his voice spoke into my heart. I have not abandoned you, Carlo. I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. I was with Joseph in the Egyptian prison. I was with Daniel in the lion's den. I was with Paul and Silas when their chains fell off. I am here with you now, in Malaz Prison, in the heart of a kingdom that forbids my name. Nothing can separate you from my love. At the mention of Paul and Silas, I remembered Brother Joseph's teaching the night of the raid, the earthquake, the open doors, the jailer's salvation. Was God about to do something similar here? Jesus continued, what the enemy meant for evil, I will turn for good. This suffering will become a testimony that shakes hearts even in this place. I will visit others among you. I will move in ways you cannot imagine. Trust me. Then he showed me visions clear, vivid scenes that played before my eyes like living pictures. First, I saw our small group, Lena, Vikram, Joseph, Hari, Salam, Abiba, and the others standing together in bright sunlight, no longer in prison uniforms but clean clothes, faces radiant with joy, hands raised in worship. We were singing loudly, freely, without fear. Next, I saw prison guards, hard-faced men who had shouted at us, handled us roughly on their knees in the courtyard, heads bowed, tears falling as an unseen power overwhelmed them. Then the heaviest steel doors of Malaz Prison swung open on their own. No human hand touched them. We walked out, not running in panic, but calmly, confidently into the Riyadh morning light. Guards stepped aside, unable to stop us. Finally, I saw a high-ranking officer, a man in a crisp uniform, someone important in the prison administration, sitting alone in an office, an open book in his hands, weeping as light filled the room. The visions faded, but their impact remained. I looked back at Jesus, desperate to understand. Were these promises of deliverance or comforts to help us endure longer suffering? He answered before I could form the question. What I have shown you will come to pass. Not by diplomacy or human effort, but by my power alone. I will shake this prison. I will glorify my name where it has been forbidden. Stand firm. Encourage the others. The hour of your freedom is nearer than you believe. Then he reached out and touched my forehead with his hand. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of fire, holy, healing fire, rushed through my body. It started at my head and flowed down to my feet, warm but not burning, powerful yet gentle. Every ache disappeared. Strength returned to my weakened limbs. Exhaustion vanished as if I had slept deeply for days. Joy exploded inside me, and words poured from my mouth, praise in a language I did not know, flowing freely, bypassing my mind. I fell back onto the mattress, weeping and laughing at once. When the waves subsided, I sat up. Jesus was still there, smiling with a warmth that made the cell feel like heaven itself. He spoke one final time. Tell the others what you have seen and heard. Strengthen them. My deliverance is coming. And when you walk free, carry this testimony to the ends of the earth. Then he began to fade. The golden light softened gradually, like a sunset retreating over the horizon. I reached out instinctively, longing to keep him there, but he continued to withdraw until only the harsh fluorescent bulb remained, buzzing as always. I was alone again in the gray cell, but everything had changed. The despair was gone. Fear had been replaced by unshakable hope. My body felt renewed, my spirit ablaze. I did not sleep that night. I knelt on the hard floor, thanking God with tears of gratitude, replaying every word, every vision. When morning came and the meal slot opened, I felt an urgent need to share what had happened. During the next exercise period, I caught Vikram's eye across the yard. I placed my hand over my heart, the usual signal, then pointed upward, and smiled with a joy that must have seemed impossible in that place. His eyes widened in surprise, then filled with questions. He nodded slowly, understanding something extraordinary had occurred. Over the following days, I found ways to pass fragments of the story through our secret network. Whispered words when guards looked away, notes scratched on bits of cardboard from food packaging, signals during yard time. The message spread cautiously but steadily. Jesus appeared to Carlo. He gave promises of deliverance. He showed visions of freedom. He touched and healed. At first, some doubted, was it a dream born of stress? But as they saw the change in me, the peace in my eyes, the strength in my step, the constant quiet praise on my lips, their doubts melted. Lena sent back a note. Brother Carlo, I believe. Last night I felt his presence strongly. We will hold on until he moves. Brother Joseph, when the message reached him, responded through the chain with just 3 words. To God be the glory. The atmosphere among us shifted. Hope, once flickering, now burned bright. We knew God was about to act in power, even inside the walls of Malaz Prison. And what he would do next would astonish us all. The days after Jesus appeared to me in that cell felt charged with an invisible energy, like the air before a storm breaks over the Riyadh skyline. The prison routines dragged on the same clanging trays, the same harsh lights, the same endless interrogations, but something had shifted. I could sense it in my bones, a quiet anticipation building among us believers. The visions he had shown me replayed in my mind. Our group walking free, guards on their knees, doors opening by divine power. I had shared as much as I could through our secret network of notes and signals, and the response from the others fueled my hope. Vikram sent back a message scratched on a piece of bread wrapper. I doubted at first, Carlo, but your joy convinces me. Last night, I dreamed of light filling my cell. He is moving. Lena's note was full of faith. We all believe now. Strength is returning. God will fulfill his word. Even Hari, who had been the most withdrawn, signaled during yard time with a subtle thumbs up and a smile that spoke volumes. Brother Joseph, our steady leader, embraced the news fully. His reply came through the chain. This is confirmation. The Lord is preparing the way. Let us pray fervently. Skepticism had given way to belief as the transformation in me became evident to all. Even the guards noticed something different. One who usually sneered at me during meal delivery paused one day, staring as if puzzled by my calm demeanor. The renewed faith spread like a spark in dry grass. We began coordinating silent prayers at the same times each day, imagining ourselves united despite the walls. Hope, once a fragile thread, now wove us together strongly. Then the supernatural events began, confirming everything Jesus had promised. It started about 10 days after my encounter, on a humid Riyadh night when the prison was as still as a tomb. I was lying on my mattress, whispering thanks for the visitation, when screams shattered the silence. Not prisoner cries of pain, but raw terror echoing from the guard quarters and hallways. Multiple voices, men shouting in Arabic, footsteps pounding, doors slamming. I pressed my ear to the cell door, straining to hear. Words like Nur light, Shabah ghost, and frantic pleas to Allah filtered through. My spirit leaped. This was it. The visions were unfolding. God was revealing himself in ways that shook the unbelievers. The chaos lasted over an hour. Guards ran through the blocks, lights flickering unnaturally, shouts fading into whimpers. By morning, the prison buzzed with uneasy whispers. Through our network and overheard conversations during yard time, pieces came together. Several guards reported seeing radiant figures, tall, glowing beings moving through walls, silent but overwhelming. One described a warmth that made his knees buckle, dropping his weapon as an unseen voice whispered in his heart. Another spoke of hearing languages unknown, filling him with awe and fear. A particularly cruel guard, known for beating detainees during interrogations, Suddenly collapsed ill, high fever, unexplained pains, no medical cause found by the prison doctor. He was removed to a hospital in Malaz district, replaced by someone milder. These signs spread fear among the staff, but ignited joy in us. Lena passed a note: the cruel one is gone, just as in the visions. God fights for us. Vikram reported a guard in his block acting strangely pale, avoiding eye contact as if haunted. We knew. Angels were at work, just as in the biblical stories Brother Joseph had taught. The most profound miracle centered on the prison warden, Colonel Ahmed Al-Kharji, a stern man in his 50s, notorious for his unyielding enforcement of religious laws. He had overseen our arrests personally, viewing us as threats to Islamic purity, ordering extra isolation and relentless questioning. No one expected change from him. But 2 weeks after the nighttime disturbances, reports filtered through. Colonel Ahmed had experienced something shattering. It happened in his private office overlooking the prison yard. Late one night, as he reviewed files under a desk lamp, a brilliant light filled the room, not from any bulb, but gathering into a form. A man in white, eyes piercing yet kind, stood before him. The figure spoke in flawless Arabic. "Why do you persecute my followers?" Then vanished, leaving the colonel on the floor, trembling uncontrollably for hours. He emerged changed, quieter, more contemplative, spending days alone instead of patrolling with his usual authority. 3 days later, he requested a private meeting with Brother Joseph, not for interrogation, but conversation. Joseph was escorted under guard to the office, the door closed behind him. What happened inside, Joseph later shared through our network, was nothing short of divine. Colonel Ahmed sat behind his desk, face drawn, eyes haunted. He dismissed the guards and asked bluntly, "Who is the man in white? "The one you Christians follow." "He appeared to me and questioned my actions against you." Joseph's heart soared. This was the same Jesus who had visited me. With tears, he shared the gospel. Jesus, Son of God, born of a virgin, crucified for sins, risen on the third day. Not just a prophet as Muslims teach, but Savior, Lord, the way to eternal life. He quoted memorized verses about God's love, forgiveness, the road to Damascus where Paul, a persecutor, was transformed. The colonel listened intently, then pulled a confiscated phone from his drawer. Joseph's own, with the Bible app. "I've been reading this since that night. The words burn in me." His voice broke. Joseph placed a hand on the phone and said, "Colonel, Jesus came not to condemn, but to save you. Like Paul, you can be changed." Ahmed fell to his knees, weeping, and prayed with Joseph, repenting, accepting Christ as Lord. The transformation was immediate. Ahmed couldn't proclaim his faith openly, risking his position, even his life under apostasy laws, but he acted behind the scenes. Interrogations eased. Food improved, extra portions, fresh fruit occasionally. Exercise time lengthened. He secretly returned a few items, like Joseph's phone hidden in a legal folder with the app intact. Most crucially, he began advocating for our release, filing reports questioning the charges, arguing we were harmless workers, no threat to the kingdom, and that prolonged detention could strain ties with countries like the Philippines, Kenya, and Nepal. Combined with the supernatural fear gripping the staff, many wanted the haunted incidents forgotten. These efforts created momentum. One Thursday afternoon, a guard unlocked my cell and announced, "You are being released. Deportation orders. Gather your things." Shock rippled through us as we were processed out. No trial, no fines, just exit visas and warnings never to return. We walked out of Malaz Prison into the blazing Riyadh sun, 18 believers, weary but triumphant. No chains, no guards shoving us. Lena raised her hands and sang softly in Tagalog. Vikram knelt on the warm asphalt, tears flowing. Joseph stood tall, praising God. Behind us, from his window, Colonel Ahmed watched a new brother in Christ, his life forever altered. A prison van took us to a processing center in Riyadh's Al Faisalia district, where officials stamped papers with cold efficiency. They wanted us gone fast, burying the unexplained events. We were warned, blacklisted forever. But freedom tasted sweet. At King Khalid International Airport, We gathered in a secure lounge for final goodbyes. Joseph pulled us close. What God did here is eternal. Share this testimony everywhere. Jesus visited a prison, converted a warden, opened doors. The enemy's plans failed to prevail. Hugs, tears, promises to connect online. Vikram left first for India, then Salam and Abiba for Ethiopia, Hari for Nepal. The Filipinos, me, Lena, and 2 others boarded last for Manila. The flight home lasted 9 hours, but felt eternal. Lena and I talked non-stop. The raid, the prison horrors, Jesus' appearance, the miracles, Ahmed's conversion. We planned to share widely, knowing this story could ignite faith. Landing at Ninoy Aquino International Airport, I heard my mother's voice calling my name. She stood with my siblings, older now, weeping. They had heard of my arrest through embassy whispers, prayed non-stop. The reunion was overwhelming: hugs, tears, questions. I told them everything: the fellowship, the arrest, the visitation, the deliverance. Word spread fast in Pangasinan. Our local priest invited me to speak at Mass in Manoag, the church packed. I shared for an hour. The secret meetings, the prison, Jesus' touch, the warden's tears. People wept, knelt, committed to Christ. Invitations poured in churches in Dagupan, Urdaneta, even Manila. The testimony rippled, conversions, renewed faith, stories of miracles echoing ours. We stayed connected. Vikram started a support group for persecuted believers in Mumbai. Joseph planted a church in Nairobi. Lena became an evangelist in Cebu. Colonel Ahmed, through encrypted messages, grew secretly reading scripture, protecting other Christians quietly. Today, back in Pangasinan, I sit in our improved home, rice fields swaying outside. Life is simple again, but I'm forever changed. If you face your own prison literal, or not know the Jesus who visited me sees you, trust him, deliverance comes. And if you've never known him, open your heart today. He's the living God, transforming lives from Riyadh prisons to Philippine villages. His miracles continue, spreading light where darkness reigns. To him be the glory forever. Amen.